Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's very special episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare.
Yeah. Guy Ritchie's latest film. Guy Ritchie, man. I feel like this guy's been blasting films out like one or two a year for the past few years. Like way quicker than his early career. And I don't know.
Definitely.
I don't know. Would you classify yourself as like, you know, a fanboy of Guy Ritchie films?
I would say, yeah, I'm a fan of Guy Ritchie. I thoroughly enjoy, especially his early stuff. It got me really hooked. And I think maybe there was like a bit of a lull in the middle, not quite hitting the heights of his earlier stuff. And then lately, I don't know, I feel like I'm really enjoying his output recently.
Yeah. And I never would have thought that I would consider myself as a fanboy of it, but the numbers speak for themselves here, because this is now the third film from Guy Ritchie we have tackled on the podcast. Okay? To put that in perspective, we have never covered that many films from one director before. Okay, we did Wrath of Man and we did Operation Fortune.
Yeah.
We did end up skipping The Covenant, I guess. I haven't seen that. Did you check that one out at all?
Yeah, it was really good. It was a solid one.
I'll have to watch it soon.
Yeah, do yourself a
favor. And then after The Covenant, he comes out with this one, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, with starring none other than Henry Cavill.
Superman himself
and his native British accent, right?
Finally, he gets to use his native accent.
Man, it is pretty wild that we're back with Guy Ritchie. And to give like some context here of this movie feeling like it came out of nowhere, it had a release date.
It did.
A theatrical release date of April 19th of this year, 2024. It never came to theaters here. And if it did, it was in here for like maybe
I was going to say, I do not recall even seeing this in the theaters or hearing anything about this. I think I saw one or two ads, but yeah, it felt like a lot of his latest movies, like even like Wrath of Man or something, which I really, I think both of us really enjoyed that one. And it felt like it's just coming out of nowhere, right? Like,
yeah. In this case, it sounds like I forget the studio who created this film. Basically did a theatrical run in the US and then struck a deal with Amazon to do a digital release in some markets. I don't know if that includes Canada, where we're located, but internationally it probably skipped the theater. Digital release date, at least in North America, was May 10th. So really just a few weeks in theaters before it gets that digital rental / purchase option, right? Which we were discussing before the podcast of like, it feels almost criminal how quickly movies come out, like video on demand. And even like our preferred format is buying movies on disc. We don't shy away from streaming movies, of course, because it's hard to resist, especially like a fairly new release. You're like, well, of course, I'm not going to wait another 2 or 3 months before this hits disc before watching it. But I think we had a good point earlier. We got to record it for posterity here, is that it was really satisfying back in the day to have a movie released theatrically and then 6 months later get it on physical, where enough time had passed where I would really look forward to watching it again.
Yeah.
Where here I watch a movie, and I think we're using Dune Part 2 as an example, where it was maybe like 2.5 months before it came out on disc. And it's like, that's just too early to watch a movie of that caliber, like right away. Like I needed more time to pass, essentially. And it's kind of hurting the box office, I think, because people know they can just wait for that release, either digitally or the physical edition.
Yeah. I mean, you think of theatrical runs back in the day where like movies were in the theater for months and months, and they had the chance to have that word of mouth spread, right? Like now it's like, it feels like by the time word of mouth comes, either through like friends and family or through like online forums, oh, I heard about this really cool movie that I saw in the theaters, you should check it out. It's like, oh yeah, it's already been it's a month later and it's already out of the theaters on streaming or sometimes even on disc already. It was like, it feels like when they talk about movies having legs, like back in the day, like this is what they're talking about. The movie was in theaters for, months and months. You got that word of mouth going. You could build some steam, build some momentum, really optimize, you want to make some of that budget back, right? It's like that, let people vote with their dollars kind of thing. And I feel like I don't think we've really struck that right balance between the theatrical and the streaming and the physical and that kind of release schedule. Yet I think there's a balance to be struck. I don't want to say that there's, because different people, like they have different, not everyone wants to go to the theater, not everyone wants to stream, not everyone wants to buy physical media, but I think there's a better balance to be maintained. Especially, from our point of view, from the audience, like, there's a specific movie and I want to see more movies of that kind or from that director or from that actor. And really, we need the chance to kind of vote with our dollars, right?
And quite often on this podcast, we talk about going out and supporting the movies that we talk about. Like the first one that comes to mind is Night House, where it's like, I think we said, go out, watch this movie, buy this movie. And, we're a little bit delayed on some of our releases. We'll record and then, a few weeks later goes by. Like we right now publish every 2 weeks. If we see this movie like on release day, we record an episode that weekend and get it released the next weekend, there's a good chance that movie's already gone out of theaters now, especially for a release like this. We can't produce our recommendations quickly enough to say, yeah, this is worth going out to the theater to see. It's like the turnaround time is just so quick. And that's what studios are looking for, is just that opening weekend box office where if it doesn't perform, they'll just immediately pull it or cut the numbers in half. I can't remember which movie it was recently where I think it was out for 2 weeks and they just cut the theatrical run in half, where I think it had a longer plan in the theaters, right?
I wonder if that was the Fall Guy, because I know there was big hopes and it didn't do as well as people, I guess, we were hoping. Because it's in like the Fall Guys. I think it's an odd space, right? Where it's, it's based on an older property that like somebody of our generation probably wasn't familiar with, the Fall Guy TV show, right? And then I don't know. From my point of view, it's kind of a tougher sell, but I think from the people who've seen it, again, it's that word of mouth. It's like, yeah, everything I've heard about it from people who've seen it, it's really, really good. But because it didn't hit that opening weekend number, it wasn't into the atmosphere. It wasn't, or into the stratosphere, whatever the quote was from Wolf of Wall Street. They just give up on it almost, right? Instead of like, no, you let it go, let word of mouth take hold, and you try to let that spread amongst the community first, right? And I feel like they're not giving those kind of movies a chance. And I don't want to say dump them on streaming, because that kind of, it diminishes the new kind of model on streaming, but it feels like they're kind of rushing it out to the platform where, the numbers, box office numbers, become more ambiguous because it's all tied up in like just the streaming service. The viewership becomes more ambiguous, and you don't really get that data to justify, oh, do we make another movie like this? Do we invest in a sequel or not? It's all kind of more, it's just like flipping a coin at that point, right? And that's part of the problem with the streaming services, like just getting that raw data. It's more complex, and I don't think we figured that out yet in terms of how to give that feedback to the studios, or how studios can make intelligent decisions based on the data yet, or how to parse that data out on the streaming side of things, right?
It's got to be difficult, because I don't know if we brought this up in our discussion of Furiosa last time, where that movie is a Warner Brothers film. It would basically come out onto Max, the streaming service, where they're not obligated, just like Netflix, they're not obligated to tell anyone how many exact viewers are actually watching this. They can hide the metrics, even from the filmmakers themselves. They don't really know how, quote unquote, successful a movie is. Where back in the day, you had the box office, you had video sales. Even now with digital sales, you would still have that information somewhere that might be like industry published, but these private streaming services, these movies get dumped in there, kind of like what you said. It's just like they disappeared into an ether of like just a big pool of money and viewers, and how they decide to split that up or decide if a movie is good on streaming or not, or like is successful on streaming, that's got to be difficult, even for the companies themselves.
Yeah. And like the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, it feels like, to be fair to Guy Ritchie, I'm not trying to diminish it, but it's like, it feels like one of those perfect examples. It's kind of middle of the road. It's not a big budget, $300 million, superhero movie. It's not an indie, low budget, movie about, people dealing with their emotions for an hour and a half. It's like in that kind of middle range, right? It's a middle kind of mid budget action adventure based loosely, I'm assuming, on a true story. Who's Guy Ritchie, and it feels like this is exactly the kind of movie that back in you think 30 years ago, which is depressing. Back in the 90s, this would have been one of those movies. It comes out in theaters. And it doesn't do super phenomenal numbers in opening weekend, but I feel like this is the kind of movie that would garner word of mouth and hold steady over the course of the weeks and months, and really have been a lot more successful under that older model. And this is the kind of mid-range or mid-budget. I don't know what the budget on this thing actually was. I could be talking crazy.
I'll tell you exactly what it was.
What is the budget on this?
This movie had a budget of $60 million.
Okay, so this is what we think about in the kind of mid-range budget. It's like, it feels like a movie this size doesn't really have the marketing budget of like the Marvel juggernauts or Star Wars, right?
Or the Fall Guy.
Or the Fall Guy. Even like the Fall Guy I heard more about than this, right?
Oh yeah.
And the Fall Guy kind of fell. So like, yeah, it feels kind of disappointing where a really, really solid movie by a really established director, it feels like it just kind of got dropped by surprise on an unsuspecting public with no prior warning, no hype built up. And it feels like it's going to go away and not make the numbers it should. And it's going to be even harder for even someone like Guy Ritchie, because I know I've heard, we've heard, we as in the general public, like Martin Scorsese's come out and said, like, yeah, like trying to get The Irishman made. I was knocking on doors at all the major studios, and this is Martin Scorsese. He's got some street cred, and it wasn't until like Netflix picked it up, right, and kind of saved the day there. And so it's like, yeah, it's even for a big name director, it's harder and harder to get that backing for some of your passion projects, or to get some movies out there, and it's really kind of frustrating.
Budget $60 million, box office in the 2 or 3 weeks wherever it was released was about $26 million worldwide. And we can't even say that's, a failure or anything, because immediately, like before release, Amazon struck this deal with the studio to release it digitally. So any amount of money, which is going to be undisclosed, maybe the movie's already paid for itself and everyone's happy. This could be a very successful film.
Yeah.
Before we get into the movie discussion, our standard spoiler warning, we don't hold back on spoilers for the movie we're discussing. So consider this your warning. Check out the movie. If you don't want spoilers, check it out right now, and then come back to our to our discussion here. So Guy Ritchie, Henry Cavill, Eliza Gonzalez. There's Alan Ritchson, who I haven't seen the show, but he's the star of the Jack Reacher TV show, which I think is pretty popular. It's on the watch list, don't worry. And then like a bunch of faces you're going to recognize, because this is what Guy Ritchie seems to be able to do. He seems to be able to pull together a lot of great character actors and put them into a fairly compelling movie, I think, right? And no different with Ungentlemanly Warfare here. What were your first thoughts after watching this movie? Did you like this thing?
You know what? I had a really good time with it. I'm using the word solid, which is usually my word for like a really good movie. Didn't quite hit those heights, but this was a blast to watch. Like, all the actors were having a good time. The movie itself was a good time. You're killing a bunch of Nazis. I mean, what's not to love, right? Like,
did you get a Glorious Bastards kind of feel off that, of just like, here's a group of elite soldiers kind of working covertly, and they're going to go kick some Nazi butt, right?
Yeah, a little bit of Inglourious Bastards, a little bit of Guy Ritchie's kind of earlier heist films. This almost had like a heist structure to it, where they're trying to essentially cripple the Nazi U-boat operations in the Atlantic by going and hitting the. I guess there was a specific ship that would resupply. It was like the carbon dioxide filters and a couple other key supplies. So that you hit this one ship in this one depot and it cripples operations for several months, enough to give Britain, room to pull in supplies and resist the Nazi, advances in Europe. And so it was like, but it was built around the heist structure. And I think that's Guy Ritchie's bread and butter. So bringing that back, it felt like a return to form, really, in a way for Guy Ritchie. So honestly, like all the characters, all the actors, you could tell they were having a blast on set, just hamming it up, chewing some scenery. But yeah, what was your overall impression of watching this for the first time?
Like exactly the same. Where I had a blast watching it. It was a lot of fun to go through. It was straight up 2 hours, 120 minutes long.
Didn't feel it though.
It didn't overstay its welcome.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. It was just like the right amount. And I don't know. I think Guy Ritchie is super competent when it comes to this stuff. And I'm glad you mentioned the heist thing, because I kind of forgot that it was his shtick. And it's like, of course, there's scenes where it's like we're planning the heist, and you're like, all right, those, like that plot device, that structure is always pretty dependable, because as the audience, things are not necessarily going to go exactly as planned here, right? And that can create a little bit of tension.
It's part of the fun. You're always wondering, like, what's going to go wrong in this heist, right? It's like, oh, everything's planned perfectly. Oh, but now the ship is leaving 3 days earlier than expected, so we gotta, change direction and sail through Nazi-infested waters. I was like, oh no, now they know that they're, they figured out at the one point. I can't remember the character's name, but they figured out she was Jewish, and the Nazis obviously didn't like that. That was Eliza Gonzalez's character. It's like, oh, what's going to happen next? Or, like now they reinforce the plating on the ship. It's double plated, so the explosives we have can't get through. We can't sink this thing. So what do we got to do with this now? And so it's always interesting seeing those twists, right? And again, because it's based on a true story, and again, assuming because it's Guy Ritchie that it's very loosely based on a true story. But it's always interesting then to go and to go read up on this and see what it was actually, what the actual operation actually was, right? And compare and contrast.
Yeah, I briefly looked it up. Basically, for what I was seeing, this is a heavily fictionalized version of the true events, and I think it's based on Operation Postmaster, which did follow sort of similar situation during World War II. But I'll leave a link to that Wikipedia article in there if you want to read the true story. I didn't go through it all because a lot of the time I don't really care while I'm watching the movie that's based on true events or not. We're at a point where we know everything is going to be done on screen for the entertainment, right? It's just like we're not going to hew to reality exactly. And I think Guy Ritchie doesn't necessarily always, there's always a heavy fiction in his true stories. There's more pulling like inspiration from these true events.
100%. To be clear, the fun part of something that's based on a true story is then it gives me the impetus. So it's like, oh, I'm going to go read up on that true story now. I'm well past the point because I'm I'm not a teenager anymore. Like I understand that based on a true story is a meaningless thing, but it's just then it's fun. It's like, oh, this is another piece of history I don't know about. I'm going to, I'll enjoy the movie for what it is. It's historical fan fiction. And then it's like, oh, it's based on true story. I'll go read the true story then. It's like almost like, from somebody who's interested in history, it's like a jumping off point to learn something else new, right? So it's that kind of inspiration. I wouldn't expect any movie based on a true story at this point to be any degree of truth based on,
especially a movie that I think is so much fun. One of the criticism I saw online and a few of the reviews I read is that it didn't have any tension, and I think I kind of appreciated that in this movie because I don't know, we watch a lot of movies and sometimes you need a light film to buffer some of the more heavy ones you watch. So here I didn't feel any real tension. I wasn't looking for that either. It's like,
yeah,
I know possibly a couple characters here might die during the finale. It doesn't really matter. The characters are kind of almost forgettable as they are, like they're somewhat generic. So it's like,
except for your,
I'm just there for the fun time.
Yeah, like obviously Henry Cavill was memorable. Carrie Elways showed up. Also, Til Schweiger, who was also in Inglourious Bastards, another connection. But he's like, if you need somebody to play a German dude in your movies, this is the guy you go to in Hollywood.
So this guy's villain. Sorry to
and this one he's the villain. It's funny because I was watching. I was like, in Inglourious Bastards, he was the German who joined the Inglourious Bastards, and he was killing Nazis.
Oh, okay.
And this one, he was the Nazi who was being killed.
That's got to be on purpose, right? It's just like they cast him there for a reason. But like also because he's a great actor, and his villain is so awesome. He doesn't do anything overtly villainous during this. He's not shooting at the good guys. He's not doing any of that. His presence alone is like kind of scary. Like other characters, it's mostly Eliza's character, Marjorie Stewart, I think. Yeah, Marjorie Stewart's her character, is mostly interacting with him. And like the scenes where they're in, like that you feel that evil presence, and it's just like, you could see what his possible motivations are, like his possible threats that he could impose upon our characters here. I thought he did an awesome job
I think it was
for
more
that role.
I think about like the term, like the banality of evil, right? Where he's a commander and he's going through. It's like, oh yeah, he's dealing with the character Marjorie. There is like, oh yeah, we got some gold that we need to sell. Obviously, it's like, yeah, they're stealing gold as they're looting England, and they're trying to they need, essentially it's like the equivalent of a fence. We want to sell, we want to transport this, we want to sell this, we want to move stolen goods, and it's like, just like it's all like business and talking numbers and this kind of thing. Is like, yeah, like it's the banality of that evil, right? It's like that's more frightening than somebody who's kind of frothing at the mouth, twirling their mustache. It's like, no, he's an officer doing his job, and that's in a lot of ways more frightening. But he did an amazing. He's amazing in everything he did. I think he was also in, was it SLC Punk? I think, going back a ways. I think that was maybe one of the first times I saw him. But he's great.
What was his name again?
It was. Let's see if I can remember this. Oh, Til Schweiger. Yeah, and then Rory Kinnear, who you might know from Men, for the dozens of us who watched that movie and loved it. By the way, check out Men. But yeah, Rory Kinnear was in there. The main dude there. What was his name? Babs. Olusanmoken. Babs Olusanmoken, who played Mr. Heron. He was in Dune. He was what was his name? Javis or Jamis? It was the first guy that Paul Atreides killed there.
Yeah.
I was trying to place him through the whole movie. I'm like, this guy looks really, really familiar.
Yeah, he's an interesting actor. He's also in Guy Ritchie's Wrath of Man.
Yes. Yeah, I love. There's something so peculiar about his mannerisms and his voice and his speech patterns. It's like I need to hear more of it. It's like it's really cool. I love when he pops up.
And Eliza Gonzalez, who is in one of your favorite movies, Ambulance, Michael Bay's Ambulance from a couple years ago there.
Oh, was she in that? That's too bad. She's also in 3 Body Problem, I think, right?
That I am not sure on. She's in Baby Driver.
I just started watching that.
She's in Alita Battle Angel. I Care a Lot as well. Fast and the Furious. She has there's a good, pretty lineup of films there.
Oh, yeah. I thought she looked familiar.
Yeah. What were some of the negative things that you walked out of here? Like, did anything it wasn't a 5-star film, but it's like, what were the problems with this film?
No, it's funny. They the postscript brought up a lot of problems because Ian Fleming was a character in this, and for those of you who don't know, Ian Fleming was the author of the James Bond novels, upon which, of course, the movie franchise was based. And the post credits, when it's going through the standard kind of things, what happened to these characters afterwards. And it's like, oh yeah, Ian Fleming based or it was thought that they based it on the character of Gus March Phillips, who portrayed by Henry Cavill. But I didn't really get that James Bondiness from that character. So it was like, that kind of came out of nowhere. Then it also said, it's like, oh yeah, Gus and Marjorie got married after this. And I was like, well, they didn't really play that relationship up at all.
Did not
in
feel
the movie. I'm just
they
like,
really shared very little screen time at all together, right?
yeah, it just felt like I appreciate the heist structure, but it was just like Carrie Elway's recruited Henry Cavill's character there, Gus. Is like, we need to put together a team, and it just felt like, okay, he just listed off some names, and there's like, okay, they're there. I was like, well, shouldn't you go and recruit them? Like, where's the recruiting scenes, right? You have to do the...
Honestly, now that you mentioned that, yeah, I was just like, where's the montage of like each of these characters doing what they're really good at and being recruited?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
They only recruit the one guy because he's captured by the Nazis, so they have to, free him along the way. And it's like, I don't know. I wish they would spend more time on those. Like, we got to recruit these characters, right? Like, because they're all in like military prison and like they're all good at stuff, and yeah.
It's kind of funny because I wonder if they do that, and then the movie becomes even like a little too cliche for the heist film. And here they're possibly some of that might get cut because they're at the 2-hour runtime, and it's like, oh, the finale is going to be a little more important to like draw that out because there's a lot of fun action to be had there.
Yeah, no, that could be it too. It could be a pacing thing. And then for like when they were shooting all the Nazis with their guns, they had the silencers on them the whole time. It's like, hey, I'm putting aside that's not how silencers actually work. They wouldn't be that quiet. But it just felt like the guns they were shooting, like, didn't seem like there was a lot of kickback or anything, or like it wasn't like, it felt like they were just like shooting like cap guns in the backyard, and there was no weight to some of the gun action and gun violence. It's like, I didn't get like, even like, I'm not expecting like Tarantino levels of, that's Tarantino. Tarantino's a genre unto himself, but even Guy Ritchie movies previously felt like had more weight behind some of those actions. Like when they're walking, when they did that assault on the Nazi encampment to free their one dude there, the one recruiting scene just felt like, it's like, oh yeah, we just walked in, it's like we're just picking guys off, and it's like not a whole lot of efforts, and the guns just like felt like they were like pea shooters. The same thing, they're doing the similar like walk down the pier at the actual depot, and it was like, was it Palo Alto or whatever the name of the island was, at nighttime, and it's like, oh yeah, just shooting guys at night, and it's like, I don't know, those guns didn't feel like they had a lot of kick to them. The violence felt a little bit weightless at times.
How about the bow and arrow action, which the one character wielded?
Yeah, I'm down with that actually. I enjoyed that. It was kind of like, I don't know why they did that. If it was actually some random fact about this dude, real life dude that they picked up and just like overplayed that. That was Alan Ritchson, by the way, who's doing that. Who is, I don't know what his workout regime is, but it's working. It's working for him. Like
he's a huge dude, and seeing him launch those arrows and be like, okay, I can understand like these arrows are going through multiple people, and he's getting the kills on them. That was kind
of I'll be honest, the bow and arrow action was a lot more had a lot more weight to it than the gun action. Whereas like, okay, there's a big dude, bow and arrows, made sense that they were on stealth missions, so it's like, okay, bow and arrow is perfect for that because it has a better chance at piercing kind of modern armor, and it's quiet. It's like, okay, that actually makes a certain kind of sense in this context. Yeah. It's like, oh, sure, I'm down with that. I'm down with like, you got to have your different kind of main characters in your heist films. Like they got different sets of skills, and whenever you put together like a band of brothers or a band of warriors in a movie, each one has to have that kind of their unique weapon of choice. So like somebody likes, hand-to-hand combat, somebody likes machine guns, somebody likes bow and arrows. It's almost like I think of it as like the Saturday morning cartoon approach, right? Where it's like, okay, you think of the Thundercats, and it's like, you got Panther, he's this big strong guy, and you got Chitara, she's fast. But you pick up one specific trait for each of your main characters in your group, and that kind of defines them. And usually in movies like this, it's like whatever weapon they like, right? And it's like, yeah, sure, he's the bow and arrow guy, right?
You had an explosive guy in there too.
Then you had the explosives guy, right? Then you have like the machine gun loving guys. It's like, then you have like the handgun people who prefer handguns. Like, okay, it's the Saturday morning cartoon kind of logic, right? It's like, I dig it, man. I dig it.
Yeah. I'd watch a whole spinoff with this character doing his own thing during World War II. It'd be great.
That's the thing. Like, killing Nazis is always good.
Right? Like the postscript there where they're talking about like some of their future endeavors. It's like, oh, maybe we should be getting more of these movies. Like, if these are based on some true events, fictionalize a few more of them for the big screen here. This
Yeah,
could be a whole trilogy here of Guy Ritchie films.
Yeah, I want to know why people would think that Ian Fleming would base the James Bond character on that dude, because it was nothing like James Bond, right?
Well, I guess maybe it's like Guy Ritchie basing it on true story is like it's more inspiration, and it's like Ian Fleming found this guy and it's just like he was inspired to make like a spy character that's maybe has nothing to do with this like characteristics of this guy.
Yeah.
There's certain expectation when Ian Fleming shows up and he takes a liking to Henry Cavill's character, and you're like, oh, maybe this guy will have a proclivity for gadgets and like weird things. But no, he doesn't, right? He's just like, he's just a guns guy.
Yeah, I guess there was like it's a similar background, I guess, to James Bond, where like it seemed like Henry Cavill's character, even though he was kind of he was in military prison at the beginning and at the end, because apparently he doesn't play by the rules. But it was also brought up quite well, actually, because it didn't dwell on it. But he was actually educated like at a really high end school like Oxford or something. I don't know if it was Oxford specifically, but he's talking to the prince of the island there, the self-proclaimed prince there, and it's like, oh yeah, he mentioned something offhand about how at school he saw I recognize you from somewhere. It's like, oh yeah, you're in the poster beside the trophy case at school.
Yeah.
So it's like just like James Bond, like they're very educated, and they went on to fight in the war and everything. So there was some stuff, but it just seemed kind of random. And it's like anytime you bring in a character like Ian Fleming, and it's like for those of us who know, is like, okay, like roll my eyes a little bit. I knew Ian Fleming was a soldier in the war, and then to bring him in like that, and I don't know what the right way to do it is, right? In this case, I just kind of played him as a regular character, no special attention brought on him. But I wish like Guy Ritchie and his particular kind of brand of humor, and he could have had a couple beats in there about, where Gus does something, and then you see Ian Fleming thinking about that, or like he's jotting down notes or something. It's like some kind of tongue in cheek kind of thing. I don't know. It just felt really weird to have Ian Fleming in there just randomly and not addressed in any way. I don't know. It kind of took me out of it a little bit.
It's just like everything else in this movie. It's kind of lighthearted and doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? It's just like, here's a little cameo from someone. If you recognize them, great.
Definition of popcorn flick. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just too bad we didn't really get a chance to see it in the theater, where I think it would have, I don't know if it does well or not, but I would have enjoyed seeing it on the big screen for sure.
Yeah.
Because some of those explosions at the end were really some good pyrotechnics going on. Some good visual effects happening.
Well, and Guy Ritchie can do action really well. I love it. Was a bunch of action at night, but I could still see everything. It wasn't a bunch of quick cuts and shaky cam. Guy Ritchie's filmmaking with action, it's super clean. You can follow everything that's going on. I think it would lend itself really well to the big screen, right? I'm a little disappointed I didn't get to see this. A lot of his recent stuff I wasn't able to catch it on the big screen, either because it had such a short theatrical window, or in my area didn't get a theatrical window at all for some of these things.
Yeah. Maybe my expectations were a bit lower on this film going in, because the last one I'd seen from him was Operation Fortune, which was fine, but really it seemed to be like missing the mark a bit. And then before that, Wrath of Man was like just this really solid, like great film overall.
Yeah.
And then we're kind of back into the higher end of mediocrity, I guess, which is kind of sounds like an insult, but it's not. It's just like, this is a movie I would watch again sometime.
And I think this is I think, was it The Covenant? I think was the recent one by Guy Ritchie.
Yeah.
I think that one was a bit more, I think that was the next kind of step up from this. Like it was more kind of on par with Wrath of Man, where it felt like, okay, this is kind of Guy Ritchie at the top of his game. And this felt like more like Guy Ritchie. It's like, okay, it's a week, it's a shoot. We're down in, tropical location with a bunch of friends. Let's just have a good time and capture some of it on camera kind of thing. Right. It's like the Adam Sandler school of filmmaking, or the recent Adam Sandler film school of filmmaking. Right. But yeah, it's like, that's the thing, is like his recent stuff is like, nothing's terrible. Right. He's putting out solid movies.
I'd almost say he's putting out too much, like
maybe too much too fast. Yeah.
I did see this comment in one of the reviews I was reading where they said someone should just tell him to like slow down a little bit, take your time with your next movie, maybe wait a full calendar year before popping out another film. Because like we got 4 of them in the past like 2.5 years here.
Right. It feels like 2 a year for the past couple of years. And I was like, this, I don't know. Like I remember waiting years and years in between Guy Ritchie flicks before, and then you get like these oddball ones like Revolver that didn't feel like they made an impact in the mainstream consciousness at all, right? And yeah, now it's like, okay, now we're getting so many out, and I feel like he's not getting I don't know if he's not getting the backing from the studios that he needs in terms of advertising and things like that. Because I feel like they're just like, maybe it's just luck of the draw, right? It could just be random chance that his films just they weren't on the top 10 priorities for Amazon or Netflix or whoever owns the rights to those movies. Maybe it wasn't okay. It's number 12 on our list, and so it's not going to get the budgeting dollars or the budget for marketing dollars that it needs. I don't know what it is, but like I think with a bit more marketing, some of these movies like Wrath of Man or the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, they could have made a much bigger impression on a much wider audience. And it's kind of frustrating to see that, some of these mid-budget action movies that used to be bread and butter are almost kind of getting forgotten or tossed aside so quickly. And there's so much fun to be had in these movies, and it's so entertaining to see some of his stuff. Like I'm sitting right now, I got Wrath of Man on the shelf behind me. I'm picking these up, and I'm going to watch them again. Right? It's like they're fun little flicks, and the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare is no different. I'm going to pick this up. It's a great little popcorn flick. You can put on 2 hours, have a good time. You don't have to think too much. Again, sounds like a backhanded compliment.
Yeah.
But it's really not. You need those movies in between. I don't want every movie to be Schindler's List, right? Like sometimes you want something a bit heavier and to delve into those serious topics. Sometimes I just want like 2 hours of good guys killing Nazis and wrecking Nazi stuff. Done. That's all we need.
Sometimes there's no better target than just a bunch of Nazis getting blown up.
Killing Nazis and, give me a good heist film. It's like I'm the opposite of Rick Sanchez, I guess. I love a good heist film. I love a good heist. So, sign me up anytime.
That's pretty well said. And any other comments here before we head into our ratings of the film?
No, I think we pretty much captured everything.
Yeah, it seemed like a pretty good summary there.
Yeah.
Before we jump into our own ratings, we will play the ratings guessing game. We subject Nathan to this. I don't know. Are you rolling your eyes on this one right now?
No, because I don't know why, but I keep forgetting. I could look this up ahead of time. It just doesn't occur to me to look up ratings on movies.
Yeah, you
I don't
can't
know why.
cheat like that. Sometimes, people get too caught up in ratings, and I do feel like that's part of the issue, which I won't get into too much, but it's like people look it up, the critic rating on like Rotten Tomatoes, see that it's like X%, and they're like, that's not a high enough percentage for me. I'm not going to go see this movie. And, we miss out on things where back in the day, like I remember doing this. My family got the newspaper. I'd open up the newspaper, and in the entertainment section was the local critics' review of this movie. And it's just like, you knew it was one person's take on it, and that was it. You had no internet or anything, or like not easy access to the internet full of every movie critic or person out there. So you definitely took more chances to go see films in theaters and stuff. But
it was word of mouth. It's like kids at school were talking about this movie. It's like, well, I want to see this movie too now.
All right. So first up is the Rotten Tomato critic one we just mentioned. They use the 100% scale. What percentage of critics review this movie favorably?
67.
Very, very close. It's 70%.
Oh, higher than I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Right
and
on.
what about the Rotten Tomatoes audience?
I will say 73.
Well, can you believe 90%?
90%. What?
And this is what really gets me in this whole discussion. This is in the back of my head, is that the audience is really enjoying this movie. They're rating it highly. I think people are not given the opportunity to go see this movie But when you release it digitally, a lot of people can see it very quickly, and a lot of people are really enjoying it. So I don't know. That's something
great.
to be said. I think that's great. It's great for Guy Ritchie. It's great for all the actors. It's great for everyone here. IMDb uses the 10-point system. What's the IMDb user average?
I'm going to go with 6.7.
6.9 here.
6.9. Okay.
And Letterboxd, they use the 5-star system.
3.2.
Perfect. It is 3.2. You got it. Add a gold star to your Real Film Chronicles
I
card.
need to go back to our backlog and listen to all our episodes to see which ones I got right and start keeping score here.
Honestly, yeah, we should add that to the spreadsheet there. And now for the moment you've been waiting for, our personal ratings. We use the same system as Letterboxd. That's kind of our platform where we log and review all our movies. 5 possible stars with a potential heart on top of that. What's your 5-star? What's your rating on the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare?
Yeah, I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5, which is a really good rating. It's above average for me. I don't think I'd be quite with the 90%, folks. I thought it was really good, really fun, really entertaining. Didn't overstay its welcome. Great popcorn flick. Throw on and have a great time. Didn't really have anything really of substance to say, which is absolutely fine. But I thought this was a really good movie, and I'll definitely be picking this one up when it comes out. How about you? What's your overall rating here?
Oh, let me double check what it is. And yeah, it is also 3.5.
There you go.
Pretty much as you said, like this was a fun movie to watch. And I think the 90%, it's not 90%, but that is 90% of audience
right
is favorable to the movie. And it's like, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who like, this is a 0.5-star or 1-star film, right? There's lots of good actors here. The Guy Ritchie is a great talent behind the camera. He's crafting a fictionalized version of true events that you're going to go look up later. That's kind of part of the interactive nature of based on true events, right? As you were saying before. There's good action. There's I don't know what else to say about it. It's a lot of fun to watch, and to call it a popcorn flick. I mean, in this case, it's great. We love our popcorn, so like.
One day we'll explain that inside joke.
Yeah. That just makes it sound suggestive now.
Oh, we love our popcorn.
Oh goodness. Anything else you wanted to mention on this film before we close it out?
If you have a chance, check out the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And studios out there, please keep giving Guy Ritchie money to make these movies. I'm loving this. It feels almost like maybe a second or maybe a third phase in his career, and it really feels like here's somebody who's super confident, who's gone through the trials and tribulations of like a first-time filmmaker, and making his mark with stuff like Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and now he's making like. This felt a lot in the same vein as like Operation Fortune, where it's just like he's out there, he's having fun. All the actors seem to be having a blast on screen. So do yourself a favor, if you haven't seen it already, go check it out. If you've seen it already, check it out again. You're gonna have a good time. Fantastic.
And I just want a bonus on here. The next movie for Guy Ritchie that is in Letterboxd is listed for 2025. It is called In the Gray. And it says 2 extraction specialists must plan an escape path for a high-level female negotiator. Okay? Now, that sounds intriguing, but who are the actors here? You've got Henry Cavill.
Okay. Tell me it's Jason Statham with Henry Cavill.
I don't see Statham, but it's Jake Gyllenhaal. Who
sign me up?
Right?
He was in The Covenant, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You've got Rosamund Pike.
Okay. I'm sold.
And you've got Eliza Gonzalez again.
Done.
I'm
already there.
Yeah, and then there's a few more actors in there that are like top 4 in my top row. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next Guy Ritchie film, and I gotta get caught up on some of the previous ones I've missed.
100%.
As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us today and taking the time to listen to our podcast. You can find us online over at realfilmchronicles.com, where we have not just a repository of podcast episodes, but many of our written reviews as well. If you're up to it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram as well. All the links should be within the show notes here. So until next time, take care of yourself and others, and be sure to enjoy your film journey.